To activate a macro, run a macro, execute or play back a macro, these terms are all synonymous, and the most common way to execute a macro is through the keystroke shortcut when you're first working with this feature. We'll create a macro in this worksheet here which identifies the cells that have pure numbers in them. As we create this macro, we may be thinking that this is the kind of macro that we could be using in other workbooks too. What if we close this workbook and looked at another workbook? We might want to use macro there too. Now, we want to save this macro in the personal macro workbook, so we've identified the steps it takes to highlight the cells that have numbers in them. And we'll start the macro recording process by going to the View tab in the ribbon, choose the drop arrow for macros, then Record Macro. Give it the macro name Highlight Value Cells, the keystroke shortcut Ctrl-Shift-V. We want to store this macro in Personal Macro Workbook. This is a separate file with the name PERSONAL. If you've not recorded a macro on the current computer you're using, you're in effect creating this for the first time, and after you're just adding to it. Any macro you record can be stored anywhere, and it's easy to move a macro from one workbook to another. If the macro is short like this one, a description is probably not needed, but for longer macros, it's always helpful when others are about to use it. We'll click OK and then identify the cells that contain values. We go to the Home tab, choose Find and Select, then go to Special, Constants, and then uncheck the boxes for text logicals. Errors, click OK, and all those cells have been highlighted. If we click somewhere now, and it would unselect all these. So we'll first apply a colour. We'll use the drop arrow on the Home tab for fill colour. We'll use one of the greens. We could also unselect these by clicking on another cell. So it's not necessary, but so we've done all the things we wanted to do. We can stop the macro by clicking the box in the lower left corner after the word ready, or returning to the View tab and choosing the drop arrow under Macros, Stop Recording. We can activate this macro, play it back anywhere we want. We can go to the Sales and Profits worksheet. The keystroke shortcut is Ctrl-Shift-V. There are the cells that have values. Each cell on this worksheet is a formula. Sometimes we may want to undo a macro, but it's not possible. You might see the undo feature available, but if I click the undo arrow or press Ctrl-Z, I go back to this worksheet. I haven't undone what was done here. So a macro that could be deleting data cannot be undone. We could remove the color manually by highlighting the cells. But let's talk about how we make a macro happen. We manually remove the color here, go to the Home tab, choose the button, and choose No Fill. If we forget the keystroke shortcut, we can go back to the View tab, drop arrow for macros, View Macros. We can view all the macros from all the open workbooks. We just want to record very little here, and we haven't recorded any here, just recorded something personal. So there it is. It's not fast, but it gets the job done. If we have a macro and we forgot the keystroke shortcut, I manually remove the color here, back to the Home tab. We forget the keystroke shortcut, we want to know what it is. Back to the View tab, the drop arrow for macros, View Macros, here it is, and go to Options. There is a keystroke shortcut. If we didn't have one, we could apply it now, or we could change or remove it if we didn't need to use it anymore. Another way to run a macro, and particularly for a macro that could be used in different workbooks, is to have a button in the Quick Access toolbar. If you right-click the Quick Access toolbar and choose Customize Quick Access toolbar, it'll take us into the Excel Options dialog box. Choose Commands from there, click the drop arrow, choose Macros. Initially it may be confusing because you see all kinds of terms, system type, entries here, but eventually you will see the macro and you'll remember its name. We'll add this to the Quick Access toolbar. If you want to change the symbol, choose Modify, and you have almost 200 choices here. Click any symbol and click OK. In any workbook at any time, regardless of whether this workbook is open or not, if we want to run this macro, we can run from this button. If the macro is such that we would only use it within a given workbook, you can also have a macro be accessible by using a button or a graphic. Say in this worksheet we wanted to use that feature and there may not be any cells which fit, then we could go to the Insert tab. Choose one of the many shapes here, pick a rounded rectangle, and type in something like Run Macro or Highlight Cells, etc. If we right-click this box, we can choose Assign Macro and click OK. Click outside of this. If we click this box, Find Numbers, it runs our macro and highlights all the cells with numbers in them. So there's various ways to run or play back a macro. To run and keep track of macros, go to the View tab where we record macros and where we view macros, and maybe change key shortcuts or make adjustments to them.